Good morning. We're here today at the Nieuwe Kerk with Paul Spies, who is the curator of this fine new show about Spain from 1598 to 1648. It occurred to me today as I was walking through this show that I don't have any idea how a show of this magnitude would come together. Maybe you could tell me a little about that.
Yeah, well, the show was in fact an idea of the Spanish embassy in Holland, since this year is the anniversary of the Peace Treaty of Münster. It's in fact in a part of the Peace Treaty of Westphalia, which is better known to English-speaking people. It's the end of the 80 Years' War. So in 1648, the Dutch Republic was officially, liberated because they got a treaty with the Spanish and didn't have to go into war every year again, like the Spanish didn't have to. So it was the end of two enemies, a new friendship. But within the commemoration in Holland, there were no Spanish shows, and the Spanish embassy came with the idea: shall we try to make something in Spain within the best museums, a collection which could be mounted in a new church as, a part of that commemoration? And we said yes, because the shows on countries and cultures, religions, commemorations are the big shows that are mounted here. So the Spanish tried first to contact most museums that have good pieces on the period from all sorts of subjects, not just art, but also on history, on science, on everything that is important within that period. And they collected a list of objects, and we then discussed it with them, and we tried to come to a new list, because we know what the Dutch are interested in, and the Spanish have their own idea on what to show. So together we made this new collection, which is now here within the museum, within the new church, as in a structure, in an architecture which gives an idea of that period in architectural sense. So it's a complete museum within the church.
Now, you had some problems with these pieces because of the atmosphere here in the new church. What did you do to remedy that problem?
Well, nowadays, when art is so valuable, you have to be very careful. And this is a church, and it's a good church. It has a heating, floor heating, so it was all right. But for art, for wood, for paper, for textiles, you should have a very, very constant climate regarding humidity and temperature. So what we made were we made showcases in which all the pieces are shown. And the only problem, of course, is that the objects you have to show behind glass. It's glass which is suitable for the occasion, but you go along the art objects. You can come quite close, but sometimes you have the glimmer of glass between you and the object. But still, that is everywhere the case where you have a show on objects from somewhere else. You have to be very careful with the loans you get.
Earlier today we were talking in the restaurant, and you mentioned there was a debate at that time about Jesus, whether he was nailed by 3 nails or 4 nails. Now, this might seem somewhat funny to us today, but then it was very serious business. So maybe.
Yes. Well, it was a clerical discussion, but it was very important to the painters, because this is a time where they try to be as naturalistic as possible. They want to show the situation as everybody could understand it. And if you nail somebody on 3 nails and he dies or becomes very weak before he dies, he falls to one side and droops like a piece of textile. So they didn't want that. They would like Christ to be a more upright person. And then you need 4 nails. And also, as you can see in the painting which is here on that subject, a plank, a little piece of wood underneath his feet, so that he would be able to stay upright when he's hanging stretched by his arms on the cross. And that would give the idea we have of Christ on the cross much more naturalistic fundament, literally. So that's the reason why it was such an important discussion and why painters were involved.
Now, we also talked about the suffering of Jesus being a significant part of perhaps allowing the peasants of that time some solace from this, from their life. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, the point is that any martyr was important to the Spanish Catholic Church, but also to other Catholic churches, because, in fact, this is the period of the Contra-Reformation, the fight against the Protestant beliefs in the north of Europe. And the interesting thing is that what I find is that within Spain, the martyrhood and the suffering of Christ was so naturalistically shown in paintings and sculpture that I sometimes believe that they were made on purpose that way, so dramatical, because it would give people an idea that their own suffering, which was large, because the period is a bad period in history for Spain regarding economy and also there were many epidemic plagues in the country in that period, that it would distract people from their own suffering, seeing the enormous suffering of martyrs and Christ, so that in fact they would feel like, what am I talking about myself all the time? I mean, this is the real suffering, and that of course calms the people, the population of the country, when there is another problem within their life, like for instance a plague or hunger or whatever. So I find it a rather tactical way of working with a religion to to involve people, to distract them from their own suffering. I believe to see that in some of the paintings.
Now, this was a period in which the arts flourished. Would you say in some ways it might have been the first media hype about conditions in the country?
Certainly art was used to show that the king was still the most mighty monarch in the world, which was not true, because he was losing his power over many regions in Europe. He was having a lot of military problems on all the battlefields which he was in. He was fighting everywhere in the world, which was very costly, of course, but it was also a problem because he lost, which was not, of course, the normal case a century before, where he was really the most important monarch in the world. And the church showed itself as being the champion of the Catholic Church, trying to spread the Christianity all over the world, in all the new colonies, but also within the own country, to show that they were, in fact, the leaders of the anti-Protestant movement within the Catholic Church. And for that, both of these organizations, you could say, needed art to spread the news, to show how important they were and how grand they were. And for that, they used art, painting, sculpture in enormous amounts, which, of course, caused an enormous growth of art. The patronage was enormous, which gives artists an enormous chance to develop into very important artists, which happened. This is the most important period of Spanish art. It's called the Golden Age of Spain for that reason.
And who were some of the painters during that period, and why were they significant?
Well, the best known, of course, is Velázquez, because he's in this little name of row of names, like for instance Rembrandt and Van Gogh and people from the modern times, for instance Barnett Newman. Velázquez was, in fact, the person that was most free to do whatever he wanted for his art, because he was a court painter, and in comparison to other painters, who were working for the church mostly, and the church was describing what to paint and how to paint it. He had an enormous freedom to, in fact, try out whatever he would think is important for his art. So, because he's the most free artist within that period, he has also developed to one of the best, or probably the best. But there are other names which were not so happy. People were not so happy to be court painter or to have this central position, like for instance Zurbarán and Murillo, who were very important, and we have very beautiful paintings in the exhibition that show the craftsmanship, but also the new techniques they developed and the beautiful styles they developed. Those three names are the best known names, but there are more names to be given, like for instance Ribera. And I think that a very important painter also, a friend of Murillo, Cano, Ribalta in Valencia, that are names less known, but we have also paintings of them in the exhibition which show that there is a wide range of painters working in that period.
Now, in your exhibition, you've also included a number of other items that were relevant to this golden age of Spain. What have you?
Well, it's in fact an exhibition not just on art, but on all aspects of culture and science. So we have a lot of objects which show the history of science, literature, theater, music, on daily life, but also on navigation, on economy and history, on politics. So we try to give a general view of the most important aspects of cultural and scientific Spain in the 17th century. But of course the paintings are the ones that are, the biggest objects. Sometimes it is, it has a counterpart in sculpture, which is also very important in that period. We have a few huge sculptures, big as life size, and that is the other part which is even less known to many people in the world, that Spain has a very, very important sculptural tradition, and that this is in fact the zenith of their Spanish sculpture. This period shows the most naturalistic sculpture you can think, and we are glad to have some pieces, because of course they are very difficult to move from the churches where they are normally to this church here in Holland.
You told me that some years back there was an exhibition in the Rijksmuseum of Velázquez, in which it was not very popular with the people. For what reason?
Well, it was an exhibition on the period of Velázquez. It was called Spain in the Times of Velázquez. What you find when you read the critics in the newspapers when it was opened is a general idea that Spanish art is too Catholic, is too mystical, is too un-Dutch, to be really, to be really enjoyed by Dutch people. Strange, because the many painters that were in that exhibition, different pieces of course, but are also here. And nowadays people go around in this exhibition and they really like it. They find it beautiful. There must be a difference within 20 years of the way people approach Spanish art in Holland. Dutch people are, I think, much more interested in mystical aspects of life, and this painting and this culture gives much more of a source for mystical ideas and feelings. So they enjoy it, which is typical. I mean, probably for our fin du siècle of the 20th century.
Now, how long will this exhibit run, and when can the people come and see it?
Well, this exhibition will be up to the 8th of March. You can visit it daily from 10 to 6. And there's also the possibility on Thursday evening to come, which is rather nice because it's dark outside and the exhibition is lit very beautifully. And it's open till 10 o'clock. And there are not so many people then as normally, so you find a rather nice atmosphere on the Thursday nights. There's also every second Thursday night a lecture on one of the subjects that are shown in the exhibition.
All right, thank you very much. This is David Heine from Mystere. Come out and see this exhibit.